Hey, I'm Nick Blevins. Welcome to the Family Ministry Podcast. It has been a long, unplanned hiatus on this podcast. I did not plan for that to happen. It's been over a year since I've posted a new episode, and it was pretty sporadic even there before that. But we're back. We're back with a new episode and many more to come. We got at least 17, 18, 19, something like that episodes already recorded, ready for you to learn from other family ministry leaders. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, I interview children's ministry leaders, youth ministry leaders, NextGen, family pastors about what they're doing in their churches, what's working, what's not working, and also that we can learn from each other and apply that to our local church. Sometimes we'll interview people that are from the curriculum side or create resources for parents or anything that is serving the next gen world as we help disciple kids and teenagers. So that's what we're here for. This episode, we have Lauren Jackson on. We're going to talk about discipling volunteers and managing your time well. So I'm really excited about that. Before we jump into the episode, two things I want to tell you about. One, if you have not checked out Ministry Boost membership, go to ministryboost.org. Check out the membership there. We've created over 50 courses, resources, ministry kits, downloadable things, all to help you lead a thriving family ministry. Most of it is about volunteers because that's a lot of what we do, right? So if you need to recruit more volunteers, build coach level volunteers that lead like staff or have a sub team or, lead huddles or whatever it might be. Lots of information on that, as well as practical stuff for your ministry, whether it's creating a new family retention plan or, thinking about Promotion Sunday and how you're going to do that well in your church. And Ministry Boost membership gives you access to all of that and more for one price each month, either for you individually or for your entire staff. Check that out at ministryboost.org. And then also this fall, we are launching something I'm really excited about. I've wanted to do this for years. We're finally doing it. It's called the Family Ministry Roundtable. It's a 2-day gathering. It's happening in Texas. It's designed for family ministry teams to come and learn from some of the best speakers as it relates to family ministry, but also other churches. And so that's why it's a roundtable event. We'll probably spend about half our time listening to talks from family ministry experts, but we'll spend half our time learning from other church leaders and what are they doing on the ground in their ministry. And so check out familyministryroundtable.com. Ideally, you're going to come to that because your church wants kids ministry and student ministry to work together as one family ministry team. And if that's the mindset you have, whether you're there or not, maybe you're on the path and you have a long way to go. Maybe your team has been like that for years and you've been operating that way. Either way, the Family Ministry Roundtable is for you. It's November 5th and 6th. In Dallas, Texas. We can't wait. We hope you'll come and join us. The early bird pricing ends May 15th. So check that out at familyministryroundtable.com. But let's jump into this episode with Lauren Jackson, all about discipling volunteers and managing our time. Well, today we have Lauren Jackson on the podcast. Welcome, Lauren.
Hey, Nick. Nice to be here.
Yes. Before we jump in, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do. And there's been some changes, and I don't know if expansion is the right word, and what you're doing to help church leaders. So tell us all about it.
Yeah. So I've been in kids ministry for almost 15 years, just learning and leading in the local church context. And then in 2021, I launched Kids Ministry Circle, which is a community for kids ministry leaders to be encouraged and equipped to love and serve the local church. And as we were hosting cohorts and coaching for kids ministry leaders, I got the question all the time of, is there something out there for student ministry leaders or leaders who are overseeing both all of NextGen, so both kids and students? And so this past year, a couple months ago, we kind of expanded and got a little bit bigger. And so now it's the NextGen Ministry Network that oversees Kids Ministry Circle and Student Ministry Circle. So we've got this big umbrella of just ways for family ministry and NextGen leaders to be equipped.
That's cool. Coaching's definitely been one of the best things I've ever done. There's certain, like I did Tony Morgan's coaching groups years ago, which was always funny because I was always like the only person from the Next Gen world in the group because he doesn't do Next Gen only ones. So it's like me and a bunch of executive pastors and lead pastors. But I always, as a Next Gen pastor, I always felt like you should wear a church-wide hat anyway. And so
totally
get yourself in those environments and have those conversations, which is so good. So that's cool that you're doing that. And more of these have popped up. We just wrapped up our registration for Ministry Boost coaching, and yours is starting next month, which is great. And so where can people go real quick in case we don't come back to it at the end? Where can they go to sign up for that or look at the details?
They can go to nextgenministrynetwork.com, or they can follow us on social media. So we're at Kids Ministry Circle on Instagram and Facebook. And that's where we push most of the content. That's where you kind of find me most, is over on Instagram.
Yeah. And it started with Kids Ministry Circle. So I think most of our conversation today is going to be for kids ministry leaders. But
Yep.
I would think, based on the questions I'm asking, you could apply that to student ministry. You could actually apply it to a lot of ministries, because we're going to talk about leading volunteers and leading
Yep.
yourself and all of that. But let's start with a conversation you had as a coach, coaching somebody recently, a kids pastor. Where do you think kidmin leaders maybe aren't spending their time as well? Now, again, to
Yeah.
even listen to this question, we all have to listen with open ears, like we're all working hard and usually more than you're getting paid for, hours wise and everything else and pay wise. But if we just sit back and evaluate, where maybe aren't we spending time well?
Yeah. I think there's a couple different things in the world of kids ministry, and it kind of depends on what your role is and what you are responsible for. I'm going to kind of stick to like maybe a kids pastor or a kids director. Oftentimes churches have like associate roles, and maybe there's like a curriculum coordinator or something where their time is spent so much more doing admin work, which is crucial to the ministry. But speaking to the director role or the pastor role, I
Yeah.
think a lot of your time should be spent casting vision with parents, with volunteers. And I think for the director role, so much of your time is spent, okay, what's next? What's coming up that I can start to be a little bit more proactive? I think so many times kids ministry directors, and this is obviously, we'll get into this conversation, and so much of what you do at Ministry Boost is equipping volunteers to kind of share the load a little bit. But so many times kids ministry directors get in the weeds, and they are scheduling, and they are printing out curriculum, and they are setting up classrooms and going to Costco to get goldfish, all of those things that really is not the best use of their time. And what they should be doing is thinking, okay, Easter's in a couple months. Let's plan for that. So then I can recruit the volunteers that I need to help me put on something like that. And so it really is creating a vision for the whole year and thinking down the line, because what you don't want to do is get stuck in, well, I don't have everything done for this Sunday. And so how are kids ministry leaders thinking ahead to, okay, what's 2 months, 3 months, 6 months down the road? Because then that sets them up to be in more intentional conversations with senior leadership that helps them and their team not feel like they're drowning a little bit. And then going back to that conversation I had when I was coaching, she asked me, how much time do I spend between kids, volunteers, and parents? And I said, well, kids go at the bottom of the list. And that's so odd to say because you're leading a kids ministry, but so much of kids ministry is equipping the saints to then disciple the kids.
Yeah.
And you can't, as a leader, you can't be the primary discipler outside of the parents for all the kids in your ministry. And so it's, how are you partnering with your volunteers? How are you investing in your team so that they feel like they're being poured into, so then they can pour out? And then it's your parents. It's, you want to continue to come alongside your parents and equip them and know what's going on and know how to support them. And so I think you need to kind of, it's a reshift of your focus and say, okay, yes, it's called kids ministry, but me as the leader, I want to make sure I'm creating a ministry to where all these kids are being discipled by an incredible team of volunteers, not just me as the leader.
Yeah. When you said that to her, did her face show you shock when you said kids are last? Or was she already like on that path? I'm curious.
I think she was. I think she was like, yeah, you're probably right. And this is, I had another conversation the other week that was someone who loves kids and like is such a great teacher and like wants to spend time with kids. She's young in ministry, and she like got this realization that she was like, oh, this job is much less about the kids than I thought it was. I'm like, yeah, it unfortunately it is. Kids ministry is not as much kids as it is managing a team.
Yeah.
And that can be a big shock for leaders sometimes when they jump into the role and they're like, wait, I thought this was just teaching kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't have to be a very large church for that to be true either. I mean, even 30,
No.
40 kids And you could do it. Don't get me wrong. And that is probably a lot of kids pastors is they're sort of one person band, you know, leading 30, 40 kids and doing all the things. And I've even been in very large churches where the kids pastor is the primary teacher every week. And
Mm-hmm.
that was interesting because I was working with that church as they were looking to hire somebody else. And it was really funny too, because there's a culture that's shaped when you do that. So like, for example, when I was meeting with them, leadership, like above that, wanted the next kids pastor to be somebody like we're talking about that empowers others and they're not the one on the stage all the time and all those
Yeah.
things. But it was funny because that church had had the same person for a long time and he was really good at that. I mean, he was great on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I talked with parents, they put like together a group of parents together for me to meet with, and I was like, oh, what do we want in the next person? It was the same guy they just had. You know, it's like we want a good teacher who's good on stage and all this thing, and we're talking about a very large children's ministry, okay, like thousands of kids, and at a really large church, and it's like so funny. You can see that in a huge church like that, and you can find that one person band also in a church of 30. And I do think there's a connection too between giving away some of those other responsibilities and then growing, you know, like I remember at my own church, like we were stuck at 60 volunteers for a long time and whatever number of kids that was at the time. And it was the giving away of responsibility and leadership that I felt like helped us, you know, grow to the next level. Okay. This is not going to be exact because I'm putting you on the spot, but like in a week, let's say it's 40 hours, which is very, very often not a week of ministry, but we'll leave some hours in there, you know, for other things, whatever. But 40 hours, like how many hours, if it was a good week, are going to some of the big categories, like other staff meetings, volunteer leadership, recruiting, weekend prep, I don't even know what to call it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so I'll speak from my experience. I think I try to spend 40% of my hours or 50% of my hours with people.
Okay, yeah.
So whether that was volunteers or parents, spending half my hours, whether that's like shooting emails or sending texts or just being more outward focused. And so who are my people? Who am I investing in? Who am I grabbing lunch with? And then the other half was staff meetings. You know, I've been on church staffs where it's very meeting heavy, where you have one staff meeting a week, and then maybe you have a prayer meeting, and then you have a smaller team meeting, and then you have a one-on-one. Like I've been in situations like that where there's a lot of meetings. And so like keeping that into account of every church does meetings a little bit differently. And then, so it's like the remaining half is meetings / prep for whatever, whether that's Sunday morning or research or reading or
the next
prep for an event coming up. Yeah. So I don't know, but it's hard because I think I have learned really efficient ways to do curriculum. And so it just doesn't take me as long. And so a newer volunteer, or maybe you just got a brand new curriculum and you have no idea how to use it and you have no idea how to use the back end system of it. It's going to take you a while. And so it will vary based on leader to leader. And again, we talked about this at the beginning of like your job responsibility. You may not have an admin. And so a lot of your work is new family follow-up and onboarding volunteers and all of that. But I would try and spend the majority of your time forward facing to your people, whether that's like, hey, I'm going to Sam's Club to pick up snacks, and you pick up a volunteer on your way and you go together or something like that. Or you bring parents lunch and invite yourself over for lunch if it's like a stay-at-home mom. Like there's ways to be creative with your time, and it doesn't have to be, hey, meet me for lunch at this restaurant and we're going to sit down for an hour. You have to think creatively on, okay, how can I use my time to match where somebody else is?
Well, and even you saying you would spend half your time with people, right there is a gauge where people can like, okay, what am I doing? I bet there's plenty of kids pastors or youth pastors or whatever, where that's not the case. Like 6 or 7 hours is probably Sunday morning or whatever, you know, so that, you know, you could count that as kind of being with people. Although a lot of kids ministry, you're just running around like a chicken with your head cut off. So I don't know how much time you're actually spending with people. But even that is a good gauge, I think. And it makes me think of a kids pastor who, she's the kids pastor at the church that kind of helped our church start and then joined our team as a groups pastor. And I remember when I was getting to know her as this church was starting, my wife and I helped her with a camp that next year, and she used a lot of the same team that she had used at the previous church. Now they were friends. And what I always remember about her is Lynette was so good as a kids pastor, led a great kids ministry there. Lynette was not wired like you would think a typical leader would be of a large church. At the time, the church was 3,200 people, probably 400 to 500 kids or something like that. And Lynette was not wired like sometimes you would think, where it's like, oh, you're a strategy, big picture, set systems, or just this type of leader. That was not her at all. She was a people person, and everybody loved her. And what I observed in that camp planning process was the way she got it done is what you're talking about. She would just hang with people and give them big things. So they didn't have small jobs. They had big jobs. And even with the camp, you know, we all had our own pieces or whatever. And I always remember that because it's just a reminder of like any personality style can lead, but investing in other people is how you get that done. And when she left there to help start our church, they replaced her with 3 full-time staff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which part of you as a kids pastor, you're like, hey, why didn't I get that help when I was there? But part of it was like, yeah, because, you know, by working through others, she was able to multiply herself.
You and I both know Nancy Matosi, and she was my kids pastor growing up. And she was she is a people person through and through. And I remember VBS would come and she would just gather her people all in a room, and she would gather them all, and each of us would have a different part of VBS. And this was like huge, that like over 1,000 kids at VBS. Yeah. And she's not a very detail oriented person. And so she just found the right people to do what she was not as great at. Yeah. And you know what she was really great at? She was like chief encourager and could empower us. And so many times she would look at me and be like, you can do this. She still looks at me. She said that to me a couple weeks ago. You could do that. Yeah. And it's just your leadership skills and your gifting come into play so much when you're planning out your week and when you're planning out how you lead and how you invite others into that process.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it's funny because Nancy and Lynette are similar. They're like, everybody loves them. You know, there's those kind of people that like everybody loves them and they just draw people in, which is great. Now, another part of leading volunteers and spending time with them is discipleship. And I don't think a lot of times kids ministry leaders think about discipling their volunteers. Sometimes you might think of that as, well, that happens on their own in their own small group or in their own class or wherever else they're connecting. And some churches intentionally do view like the team you serve on as a volunteer is part of your group and all that. Right. But I feel like that's not the norm. I feel like most churches, it's kind of like they're volunteering here, but they're growing in faith there. And then a lot of churches do, it's a mix. They're trying to help. So what do you recommend there? What do you think that could look like discipling your own volunteers? Yeah,
I think some really simple ways to disciple your own volunteers is just to ask the question, how are you being discipled? And sometimes you don't even ask that question and you assume that like, oh, maybe they're part of a small group, or maybe they're part of women's and men's Bible study, or maybe they're just attending church on Sunday morning. But as a kids ministry leader, your role is to take care of your people and to lead them well. And in order to lead them well, someone has to be pouring into them, whether that's a volunteer who's in a leadership role within the kids ministry, or that's a small group leader or like a home group, whatever you call it. And then there's so many different discipleship opportunities within the local church. But you as a kids ministry leader should take it upon yourself to say, are these people participating in the discipleship rhythms that we have in place? And that is just a simple question. It's like, hey, what are you learning from God's word right now? How are you fitting this in? What is God teaching you, whether that's through participating in kids ministry or whatever the teaching series is for that month or season? And just asking the question. So many times kids ministry leaders focus on policies and procedures, which are so crucial and so important. But also you can't forget about the heart of the volunteer. And if you want them to disciple others, they have to be being discipled. You have to show them what that looks like. And now a kids ministry leader can't disciple all their volunteers. Whether you have 20 volunteers or 200 volunteers, that's not your job is to not be a mentor or a discipler for every person in your ministry. So that's when the kids ministry leader goes to the adult discipleship director or goes to the lead pastor and say, hey, I'm seeing this hole. Our volunteers are not growing in their faith in a way that we want them to. Can we work together to figure out a way to get these people to grow in their knowledge and love of God? Because that is what's going to impact your ministry. Yes, policies are going to keep their kids safe. But moving past having a safe environment, you want these kids to learn about who God is. And the only person who's going to show them what that looks like is a volunteer opening God's word together and engaging in conversation and letting the Holy Spirit work through that entire situation. And you just kind of have to, I think, starting with asking the question of, can the people accurately communicate the gospel? If not, start there.
Mm-hmm. And I think if you, like, we're both fans of like a coaching model or some kind of model where volunteers lead other volunteers to help. When you have 40 volunteers, like, you lead 4 people that all lead 10 people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in that moment that I feel like you could disciple 4 people. Yeah, you can't do 40, probably can't even do 10 all that well with all the other things you're doing. But you could do 4, and then can they mimic what you've done to their 10? Or you could do 8 and they're mimicking it to their 6, or whatever the math works out there. I think you could do that, because that's like related to our question about where do you spend your time. One of the things I would say is when you have a coach structure, or any, what do you call it, whatever you want, but there's volunteers that lead other volunteers, or, you know, they lead entire teams or areas. I felt like you get to a point where like 60 to 80% of the time you spend with volunteers is spent with that core, the ones that are leading other people. And only 20 to 40 of your time is spent with all of them. You know what I mean? There's a sense of like, narrow your time here, which would then allow for more discipleship. And there's even ways our teams have done this throughout, you know, our years as a church. It's not been like an intentional thing that always happens, but even pulling small discipleship conversations into the volunteer huddle before you serve.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Something like that. Like, hey, we're going to read this together. Like, I know when our church has done, we're about to start an alignment where what we teach in the service is what small groups talk about. Like, that's an easy time to also raise that question in a volunteer huddle. Like, what?
And also
the readings this week.
It's like, you could just talk about what the kids are learning. You could say, hey, today we're learning this story about King David. Here's a question that might pop up in your small group environment today. Here's a great way that you could answer that. Or like, Easter's coming up, so we're going to be talking about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. There's some big theological topics that happen in that weekend. And so start preparing your team, because ultimately it's about, do your volunteers feel confident engaging in the story of Scripture with the kids? And a huddle is a perfect time to start implementing. You could do an attribute of God for the whole month and just talk about that, and talk about God's faithfulness and where we see God's faithfulness. And that could be like a 2-sentence encouragement throughout the month of March.
Yeah.
And that's one way that you are discipling your volunteers.
Yeah. And we've talked a little bit about like leading ourselves in our own time and discipling volunteers. And how about you? I know something you talk about is relationships with other people, staff, your pastor, whoever your boss is, your youth pastor, if you're a kids pastor, you know, like, how can kids ministry leaders do a better job of leading up, or not even just leading sometimes, but connecting, you know, with whoever is leading them, but also leading out to their peers, you know, whether it is youth ministry, or like you mentioned, talking to whoever's on the adult discipleship side when it comes to that. Like, what can that look like? How can we do that better? Because sometimes it is silos. It's just we're doing our own thing.
Totally. I think there's a couple things that come to mind. The first thing is leaders have to check their own hearts. They have to know if they're going into a conversation with their agenda to get something. I think going into a conversation with a staff member and a coworker to just get something out of it. Maybe it's you get stage time, or you get an extra email. I don't know. I've been at churches that are really peculiar on how many emails are sent during the week.
Sure.
Or it's like you want more budget money, or you want these volunteers. And if that's your desire in a conversation, you're going to lose, basically. Like, you're going to be disappointed. And so as leaders think about leading up, it's okay, what is God asked me to do? God has asked me to lead this ministry, but this ministry is one of many ministries. And I made this comment one time of kids ministry is not the most important ministry at the local church. And I feel like it kind of ruffled some feathers a little bit, because And I get it, coming out of like a conference or like you are in a coaching call or whatever, and you're like, man, the next generation is so important. Yes, it is. But if you walk into a meeting with all of your coworkers and you're like, kids ministry is the most important, nobody is going to want to engage with you. And so you have to have a team mentality going into conversations about leading up. And I would say my second thing is be prepared. And there's a difference between going into a meeting asking for something and going into a meeting for participation. And so, like, for example, if you're hosting an Easter event in the next couple of weeks, if you're hosting an Easter event and you want your lead pastors to show up, don't ask them to do anything.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need anything from them. You're running a great event. And so it's like, hey, we would love for you to show up and just participate, just hang with the families. We have all the details set. We don't need anything. We just want you to participate, and we want you to be there because that matters to our families. And honestly, it would probably matter to you as a kids ministry leader to have their presence as a way of support and encouragement. And so instead of going to a meeting with problems, you want to go with solutions. You want to show up and say, hey, we don't have enough volunteers for this, but here's A, B, and C plans that I have to try and fix this. What do you think? Do you have any other thoughts? And so much of leading up is just showing people that you know what you're talking about and you've done the work and you're continuing to do the work to lead as best as you possibly can. And I think when you're leading with your peers, so with like a student ministry leader or a group's pastor or something like that, build the relationship. You want to have fun. Like, you want to have fun. These are integral parts to your ministry. And so start with, hey, do you and your family want to come over to my house for dinner? Or do we want to collaborate on an event? I mean, we're coming up on Promotion Sunday season. And so how are you collaborating with your student ministry leader to create a really fun and easy on-ramp for your kids and families? And so it's like, be proactive, own your ministry, be prepared, and just come with humility. So those would be my few.
Yeah, those are good. Those are good. If we could do, like, even go back to the time, if we could spend more of our time on the right things individually, more time with people, we would be able to disciple volunteers more, lead volunteers better, connect with other staff better. And it's one of those things, it's like, yes, it's hard because if you're listening to this, like most kids ministry leaders, you're like, I don't have time for any of that. So like, how do I make time? But making time for that is what makes time for the other things, because spending time with these other people is what then allows you to hand ministry away and then frees up time now to spend more time with people. Like you have, so there is, and that's where it's like when the rubber meets the road. I even say this about volunteer recruiting. There is that harsh reality that for a season, you probably have to work even harder. You know, it's no different than handing something off. It's like, it's easier to do it than to teach you to do it. But if I just work harder for 4 weeks and teach you to do it, then I have freed time for the rest of, the time that you do it. So that's important here too.
And I think people have to be honest with what the time they've been given and what their goals are. And if you are working part-time and you decide that you want to write your own curriculum, that probably is not the best decision. That's not the best use of your time.
Full-time jobs on top of your part-time job.
Yeah. And so it's just, I think leaders have to be really honest with, okay, what season are we in as a church? What season am I in as a leader? I mean, I worked full-time while having really, really young kids. And that's a whole different capacity when you're in that season of life. Like, your brain is only like half working. And so you're just like, okay, what can I actually do in this season? And if you're in a rebuilding phase, if you're in a recruiting season and recruiting volunteers and training volunteers, okay, then what else has to come off your plate? And I think sometimes people get so caught up with saying no means no forever. Saying no to something for a season does not mean you're saying no forever. And so I think leaders just have to sit down and be really honest with themselves. Okay, what season are we in? What season am I in as a leader? What season is our church in? What is on my goal list? And how do I actually attain those goals? And who do I need to bring along to attain those goals? And I think those honest conversations are really hard and really humbling because you want to do everything all the time. And sometimes you just can't.
Yeah, there's more things to do than there is time to do them in ministry, mostly in life, but certainly in ministry. Well, remind people how they can connect with you. Thanks for taking time to talk about this. Kids Ministry Circle on social, And
Yep.
the coaching groups are starting, probably in a couple weeks from when this airs.
Yep.
So.
Our cohorts start at the end of February. We have one-on-one coaching. Our cohorts this year are kids ministry, student ministry, and NextGen leaders. So if you oversee both kids and students, that's where you belong. And so, it's going to be a great season.
Cool. Lauren, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Nick.
Well, thanks for listening to this episode of the Family Ministry Podcast. Check out the show notes for all the links and more notes, everything you'll find there. And don't miss Ministry Boost membership that we talked about. You can get everything for $27 a month for you, or $47 a month for your entire staff. Actually, it's a great deal for your whole team to fast forward growth in your ministry as you develop. Don't start from scratch. Get it done in less time with the courses and resources that you get as a part of Ministry Boost membership. And then hopefully we'll see your team at the Family Ministry Roundtable this fall, November 5th and 6th in Dallas, Texas. We can't wait to gather with other church leaders and their teams and family ministry and talk about how can we best reach and disciple the next generation, partner with the parents, and do a better job working together as kids ministry and student ministry as one team. So we hope to see you there, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Family Ministry Podcast.